Parents told my brother that he could take my house and I could just live in a camper in the backyard because I'm single and he has a wife and kids. Part 1. I'm a single man in my early 30s. I've got a brother who's 29 and he's already got 4 kids now. He had his first at 22, and the second followed a year later. Then the third 2 years after that, and the fourth is most recently born a couple months ago. His wife, my sister-in-law, and I did not get along, as she always likes to try and get a rise out of me by acting superior, then turns into an extreme self-victimizing drama queen if I retaliated against her in any way. She can cry in an instant, and can put on an extremely convincing show to get sympathy from just about anyone. My parents and brother absolutely adore her though, even if they know exactly how she really is and just don't care. She's very good looking, I'll give her that, but she's so awful that I could never be attracted to her. She also refuses to get any sort of job, even though she has a college degree, and my mother willingly helps with the kids all day. So, their finances are entirely dependent on my brother. This also means they can't afford to live anywhere but my parents' house, and privacy is a bit of an issue, with all of them under one roof in a 3-bedroom house that was built in the 60s. Growing up, my younger brother was also the obvious favorite. We're 3 years apart in age, but he developed a superiority complex because I was badly punished if I retaliated against his antics in any way back then. It was obvious my parents cared for him a lot more, because he got the lion's share of everything, unless people called them out on it. Which did happen a fair bit by other members of family, which is why my parents packed us all up and moved us about 150 miles away from them, so they generally would only see us on holidays since it was a 3-hour drive. My brother got physical towards me on a number of occasions, flirted relentlessly with my first girlfriend to the point she broke up with me, and laughed at any misfortune I had. And my parents just told me to suck it up whenever I was upset about it. I only got equal treatment when my parents wanted to keep up appearances. I admit it was rather funny to see the looks on their faces whenever they had to treat me equal to my brother on birthdays and Christmas because other people were present. We had relatives that were very nosy and loved gossiping drama. So my parents did their best to hide what was really going on and threatened to take all my stuff away if I didn't keep my mouth shut. If anything, it just made my parents celebrate more when I turned 18 and moved out, because it meant they no longer had to provide for me. I wasn't even done with high school yet when I moved out, but couch surfing was far better than living with them. I was low contact ever since leaving home. They didn't even show up for my high school graduation, but I really didn't care. From that point on, I would usually only see my parents and brother on holidays like the rest of the family. The start of 2020 pandemic was not kind to me. I lost my job and couldn't renew the lease on the condo because my roommate also lost his job, and neither of us could afford the place on unemployment money. It was a rented 2-bedroom condo that I really loved. As the lease was ending, my roommates left early to move back in with relatives, and I had to sell nearly all of my stuff because I was soon going to be homeless if I didn't downsize to an extreme. I really shouldn't have rented a place that was so expensive, but I liked living the high life. Until that, life wasn't kind to me, and I realized I should have been living somewhere far cheaper so I could have saved more money to fall back on. But I had a plan. I own a truck simply for the fact that I've always loved trucks. So, I found a $1,000 camper in good shape and put it on my truck just so I could live out of it for a while. It was supposed to be temporary, but I ended up living out of it far longer than I ever thought. I originally was hoping to be able to live out of the camper at my parents' house, where my brother and his family still reside as well. But when I asked my parents to let me stay for a while, they told me they had a full house and didn't want me there. Plus, we hadn't exactly gotten along in the past decade. They said they'd only agree to let me park my camper there if I paid them basically what it would cost to rent an apartment in my area. That was way too much just to park my camper. I was jobless and tried to save as much of my unemployment money as I could till I could find a new job. I may as well be living in an apartment with that rent price they were asking. My parents called my camper an eyesore and told me to take a hike since we couldn't come to an agreement. And sister-in-law thought it was absolutely hilarious I had to live in a camper. My brother joined her in pointing at and mocking me while calling me a homeless bum. So, I parked my truck/camper in the store parking lot to sleep on the first night that I had nowhere else to go. I felt scared out of my mind that someone might try to break in. Suffice to say, I didn't sleep well that night. There was nowhere else I could go, as any other relatives that owned houses were fairly far away and all my friends were all apartment people. And I was pretty attached to my area as well, so I didn't want to just leave. I'd also had my mail forwarded to a friend's apartment. It was the only way I could still get my mail anymore. Finding a stable place to park was pretty difficult. I went looking around to try and find a job similar to my old one. It took months of living the nomadic camper life. In that time, I had to deal with a lot. Everything from beggars and drug addicts to people demanding I leave because my camper was an eyesore. At one point, someone had told me to move claimed to be with an HOA. I wasn't even parked on a street with houses. And when I questioned, what HOA? They got incredibly belligerent and threatened me. So I moved my camper anyway just to avoid a trouble. In order to have a steady supply of electricity, I learned to use a long extension cord to plug in anywhere I could to recharge my camper batteries. This meant sneaking around and plugging it into an outside outlet of a random building while parked on a street. I know that's a crummy thing to do, but I had to keep my batteries charged so my refrigerator would stay cold. I had a small solar power bank for recharging my phone, but I didn't have anything like a generator. And generators are noisy and required fuel anyway, so I did what I had to do. After months of living like that, I finally managed to get a new job. I had to move to the neighboring city to find a job that didn't involve retail. I worked retail while in college and promised myself never again, though I was nearly ready to break that promise. I was still getting unemployment money, but I had no stable place to live while receiving it. And I didn't want to still be jobless when it ran out. Plus, I was bored out of my mind. I had little else to do but read, watch movies on a small portable DVD player, use my phone or laptop, and keep note of where I could park and what local public bathrooms I could use. I kind of envy that the Japanese have public bathhouses. We could really use stuff like that over here. When I finally landed a new job, I practically lived in the back lots of the building by the warehouse and old employee parking spaces literally no one else seemed to bother using, because they were so far in the back that the area was borderline forgotten. My boss/company owner actually liked this arrangement because I was willingly available to take any shift I could get, so long as I had enough sleep. He even let me take the camper off my truck and set it up in one of the spaces so I could drive around without it. Not exactly sure if this was legal, but no one bothered us about it. The entire time I lived back there, I didn't have to deal with many trespassers. There were a few, but the security guards escorted them out. I was pretty much on call almost all the time when they needed me, and was working virtually every day of the week. My boss let me plug my camper into the building for power and water, and I paid a small amount of rent by working for free on Sundays, when no one else was in the office but the janitor and security guard. Beyond that, I usually had to shower at a friend's apartment or at my local gym as the camper didn't have a shower in it, but only a portable toilet. And I didn't want to fill it because emptying it is a nasty chore. So I used other bathrooms as often as I could. I had a key to the warehouse and could go in to use the bathroom there at any hour. I was even on a first-name basis with the night security guard, who's since become one of my closest friends. The camper was easy to heat in the winter with a small electric heater. Summers were not fun though. The camper didn't have AC, so I had to get a used portable air conditioner just to make it bearable. I made a lot of overtime pay, and hands-on learned some new skills from other employees. Eventually, midway into this year, I landed a better position in the company as a supervisor, and started making a better salary than my old job. That's when I decided I wanted a house. The scare I'd gotten from losing my condo made me realize I needed something much more stable for the long term. I looked around for something close to my work, and just 2 miles away found a 3-bedroom manufactured home in a small property. But I managed to get it for $10,000 less than the asking price somehow. I used nearly my entire savings for a down payment and got approved for a home loan. I finally didn't have to live in a camper anymore. There was enough space for me to back my truck in behind the house, to take the camper off to set it up in the backyard. So, I put it there as its own little building just in case I want to use it again. When I was fully settled in the house, I was dumb enough to brag about it on my book of faces. My family saw the post, and that's where this crap really starts. After a few weeks, my parents and brother along with his family came to visit completely unannounced to have a tour of my home. I didn't even give them my address. So how they found out where I live, I still don't know. None of my friends have fessed up, and no prior family members visited me before that. So I wonder if they stalked me at work and followed me home or something. It really wouldn't surprise me. Once I opened the door, they practically all shoved their way in like rambunctious tourists, then just started making themselves at home. They all kept poking around, and sister-in-law had this creepy smirk that she was repeatedly flashing me. And it was only later that I figured out why. and it made me madder than a bull on steroids that just got stung by a hornet. My parents were constantly talking about how I've got so much extra space now, and it's too much for someone like me who has no wife or kids. Sure, not now, but maybe someday. And my brother kept remarking about how there was more space than our parents' house, and my house was closer to his job too. Red flags all around, I know. Eventually, my brother asked me to speak privately. Everyone else suddenly left the room and piled out onto the front porch. That's what finally made me realize they'd planned something. My brother, who we'll call Dan, said the house was too much for me alone, that I should let him move in with his family because his wife is pregnant with kid number 4. And my house is much closer to his job. He pointed out that I already have the camper, so I could just live in that outside while they live in the main house. And I'd like to point out that Dan never once spoke of offering rent. Mind you, he's got a good job. He also started talking about how there would be changes and even curfews, and that I couldn't just walk in at any time without prior notice. If it weren't my brother, I think the person I was talking to had lost their mind. But Dan lost his marbles long ago thanks to our parents treating him like he was the center of the world. I tried to speak, but he kept talking over me as if I had no say in the matter. There was no way in hell I'd rent my house nor parts of my house to him. Other people maybe, just so I can pay the mortgage off more easily. But certainly not him, nor his nasty wife. I've heard of this exact kind of situation in videos online many times, and never once did I think I'd actually live it because I thought it so ludicrous. But my parents, brother and sister-in-law do all fit the bill for a bunch of narcissistic entitled crazies. So, I picked up my phone and set it to start recording, then just held onto it. Dan didn't even seem to care or notice that I'd done this, and just sat there with his arms waving around while talking about all the reasons of why he needed my house. Then went from saying that to acting like it was a done deal, and trying to reach out his hand to shake mine. That's when I finally showed my backbone and said, "Hell no." And I said it loud enough that Dan stumbled backward for a second. I'd rarely ever raised my voice to him on that level, because I was punished by our parents whenever I did. But this was my house, not theirs. My spine can be as shiny as it wants here. I stood up and then told him that my house was not up for grabs. And acting like I let him move in just because they want it won't make it happen. I bought my house for me. It is not my fault he keeps having more kids, and he has to keep living with our parents because he can't afford to move out. Dan got as physically close to me as he could without actually touching me and said that I didn't deserve the house, and he needed a better place for his family to live. I laughed back in his face and said that was total BS, because I worked hard to be able to buy my house. Of course I deserved it. Dan started yelling that I have no wife or kids and I don't need all the space, so I may as well give it to him. I said I'm not giving him anything, and he never even offered to pay me rent. If I let him move in, I'd still be covering the entire mortgage on my own house without even being able to live in my own house. Then Dan told me that he shouldn't have to pay rent because his family comes first, and our parents said I was going to do this, and that I will. I yelled as if their word was law or something, then told Dan that they did not have the right nor power to give my house to him. Then right on cue, my parents and sister-in-law barged back in through the front door and surrounded me to try and force me to agree. There was a lot of fighting, but to sum it up from this point on, I heard a line, "Just do it for Dan," way more times than I can remember. In the fight, I told them all they don't have a say in my life or my house and to get out before I called the cops. Sister-in-law screamed the loudest at me about how she was pregnant again and I can't do this to her. I said I did nothing to her. She just assumed she could take and take from me, like I would just allow it. I had no obligation to her or her family. Then, I called her a stuck-up witch who never had any respect for me. So I don't care what she thinks or how many kids she has. I have no sympathy for her. She won't be living in my house. Well, that made her angry enough to attack me. She got in one good hit on my face and tried to do more, but my brother held her back, kicking and screaming. She kept demanding he let her go so she could scratch my eyes out. The phone I was holding recorded pretty much everything. So I held it up and said I was going to call the police if they didn't leave right away. My parents told Dan they were leaving. Then my mother said that I had a week to come to my senses. I told her I won't be, and to not come back. Then I told sister-in-law that my phone recorded everything, and if she tries anything, I'll press charges for assault. She screamed at me and then stormed out, loudly crying with her face in her hands. My mother was the last one out the door and said that I'd better do this for Dad and sister-in-law. I responded by telling her I won't be. Now for the comments. I would get an order of protection against the sister-in-law. I would also invest in security cameras and upgrade the locks. Maybe even invest in a big dog to act as guard dog for the property. That way, when they return, you have proof of trespassing. File a police report anyway. Let the cops deal with her. Do not get a guard dog. With people as unstable as Opie's family, they're just as likely to kill the dog by feeding it poisoned meat or shoot it and claim self-defense for a poor pregnant woman. Okay, homie, I read it all and goddamn. Here's my 2 cents. 1. Go no contact with the lunatics, no matter what. 2. Do them solid and send that recording to the rest of your family. That way, you can go to the extended family holidays without having those crazies around. 3. Don't be sad about it. It ain't your fault that your brother can't finish in your sister-in-law when he has a big enough space. And definitely not your fault because she refuses to work when your parents already babysit the kids. 4. Keep your insanely strong mental going. You have a winner's attitude, and you continue to win in life no matter what it throws at you. 5. If they ever do this again, police. You already have evidence, so just go for it. You can also consider having cameras around your property just for the property's safety. 6. Get yourself a family of your own. You deserve it. And once that's settled, send some mails asking your parents when will they move in the trailer to make room for your kids. And also let them know the rent they must pay to use your trailer. 7. If sister-in-law tries that again and you catch a second attack on camera, CPS may want to look at how stable she is to be allowed to raise kids. Tell your boss too, so that if they turn up at your job trying to cause trouble, he's already aware of what's going on. Getting a lawyer to send a cease and desist might scare them off for a bit too. First story is titled, Am I the a-hole for making my father-in-law homeless because he doesn't respect my job? Because of the divorce of his second wife and the pandemic, my father-in-law had difficulties to find a new home, and we offered to take him in. I studied to become a teacher and started very fresh with this job. It's complicated because I have to do everything online, but I love it. I work from home. We have a guest room, but before father-in-law moved in, I said to him that I have to work from this room. My desk, books, and everything is there, and if that would be a problem, he can stay in the living room. He said it's not a problem. Since the day he moved in, the drama begun. He makes comments about how useless my subjects are: history, politics, and philosophy. He was a policeman, but he got a health issue, so it doesn't work anymore. He said the children should learn things that help society and not become dumb philosophers. I tried to explain him what we talk and discuss in these lessons, but he didn't listen. Then he started ranting to my partner, when he is home, how teachers are overpaid because they only have to babysit children, and everybody can do that. He, as a father, saw himself as a teacher too, for his sons, and he didn't need a degree or that much money. I'm from Europe, Germany, and yes, I'm happy with the pay, but it's not like it makes me rich. My partner said to him that is not true and ended the discussion. Then he came in the guest room while I had a Zoom meeting in the morning with a beer in his hand and only a shirt and boxer shorts. I was super angry and disappointed. I talked to him later about this and said that it makes a false impression for my students. He disagreed and said it's his room. We discussed it for hours, but it was a wasted time. I often drive to my students to bring them a copy from the stuff we do if they don't have access to the internet or no way to print it. My father-in-law said that I'm overdoing it because he's here, and that teachers are lazy and have too much free time. I tried to tell him politely how much work teachers who love their job have, but he didn't listen. Next day, when I left the room for 2 minutes to get something for the Zoom meeting, he went in the guest room and chatted with my students. They were all really uncomfortable about my subjects and how useless they are. I had enough. I said to him that I get he's on a low point in his life, but this was one step too far. He said, if you can't master your own father-in-law, how will you master 25 kids? And I said to him that I don't need to master adults. I told him to leave, and when my partner came back, he stood by my decision. When my father-in-law was away, he told me he found me too harsh and that it's kind of an a-hole move to kick him out because he makes bad jokes about my job. His younger brothers called us later, hearing the story from their dad, and told us we will never be invited again in their households after we prove that family isn't important to us. Now for the top comments. Not an a-hole. Him doing that on Zoom could lead to consequences for you at your job. Also, ironic that he thinks philosophy makes you dumb. As a fellow teacher, 100% this. You can be sacked for this. The parents would cause a scene about this, and the teacher involved would be sacked for this. You need to lock the door when you're on Zoom teaching. This is unacceptable behavior, and people like that don't understand just how hard us teachers work. They think it's babysitting and chill, but they don't see us sitting there right up until the 6 p.m. deadline, entering the date at 5:59 p.m., trying to get it done, or it's your head on the blogs, or staying up until midnight to finish planning, and then getting up at 5:30 a.m. to get into school early to set up, etc. It's hard work. Not at A-Hall. Please send the rest of the family an update as to how your father-in-law behaved, and why you had to kick him out. He will burn you for kicking him out. You have every right to share the exact reasons with family and friends. Don't be a scapegoat. You protected yourself, your work, your students, and your home by kicking him out. You did a decent thing. No kidding. If he wants to play the family card, they have every right to tell the truth to the family members. How the father-in-law treats family by blatantly disrespecting someone who took them in and gave them shelter, and who deliberately jeopardized their job by sabotaging his teaching. He doesn't have to genuflect to OP every day, but it's not asking a lot to not openly ridicule someone for their interests and not interfere with one's legitimate job. Yeah, who needs history and politics lesson to help today's society? And what's to learn from German history anyway? Oh wait, not at A-Hall. Cheers from Berlin and thank you for your service. The next story is titled, Am I the A-Hall for telling my dad he chose his wife but I didn't? So, my dad has been married to his wife, Regina, fake name, since I was 10. I have issues with her that just get ignored, so I do my best to keep to myself and not start fights or be rude. Basically, I am civil but try to avoid her the best way I can. She and my dad don't like that, and she has tried to bond with me a lot in the last 6 years. I'm 16 female, by the way. My dad decided we all needed to go to therapy because it wouldn't be good for my half-brother to grow up in a family where we're not close. We started therapy in October, and we have seen, I think, 3 different therapists since then. This current one he likes, so we're staying put. But sessions are basically him just saying what the issues are, what fix he wants, and telling me I need to put more effort into this family. Then 2 sessions ago, he said that we chose to make Regina part of this family, so we need to do what we can to make this work for everyone. I told him that he chose Regina, but I didn't, and that I get it. As the kid, I don't get that power, but I told him I could not say I chose her. He told me I did. I pointed out that I actually told him I didn't like her before they got married and I didn't want him to marry her. He did it anyway. I'm not bitter about it. By now I get that it was his choice, but it annoyed the crap out of me when he made it sound like I actively wanted her. The therapist doesn't really say or do anything except ask me why I feel that way and why not give her a chance. So there's not much point there. My dad told me it was rude and mean-spirited to say I didn't choose her in front of Regina and in front of the therapist. He told me that the wedding was us choosing her. I told him if that's what he believed, then go right ahead. But I never did choose Regina. Regina also couldn't believe I didn't choose her and has been upset and crying for the last 2 weeks. She said she didn't understand what she did. Except I did tell her and my dad before, and it was ignored. It was also ignored in one session with a different therapist, and even though that therapist did try to explore it, we never saw him again after that session. Am I the a-hole? And because people will ask, my issues with her started when she moved in first. She made comments about my mom leaving me, but she didn't. She's just unable to take care of me after an accident left her disabled, and she's in a nursing to get around-the-clock care. Then, she talked about adopting me due to abandonment before they were married. She told me she would like it if I called her mom, so we could feel more like a real family. There was a 2-year period of that. Then she got pissed at my grandparents for taking me to see my mom during my visitation with them, and made a huge stink out of it. And then she was pissed when they gave me my mom's locket that she had wanted me to have eventually, though I'm guessing not under the circumstances, because she wanted to give me one with a photo of her and my dad. Now for the comments. Not the a-hole. You can't be forced to like her. And it sounds like your dad is deliberately choosing therapists that don't listen to you. That's likely to be counterproductive. It took 3 therapists to find the one that agrees with him, and yet he still thinks it's his daughter with a problem. Lol. Not the a-hole. You should not be going to a therapist and lying. How good a therapist is this if the best she can say is to give this lady a chance and not stop your dad from telling you what you chose? Yeah, not the best one. We had a good one, and we left after things started being revealed. I see. This situation is very toxic. You don't take someone to therapy to make them do what you want. You take them to therapy to understand them better. I'm sorry you're in this situation. Not Dayhall. This is therapy. If there's anywhere you should be able to express your feelings, it's there. Your father doesn't want to work out the issues. He thinks you're the problem. You're broken and need to be fixed. He wants you to comply. He wants to make Regina happy whether you like it or not. He is putting her over you, and you will go through therapists until he finds one that agrees with him. Regina sounds all kinds of messed up, like she tried to erase your mother's existence. As soon as you can, move out. Next story. Am I the a-hole for not letting my ex move into my flat? I, 32 female, recently inherited a house from my grandparents. I moved in along with my 2-year-old daughter about a month ago and have been looking for a boarder for the downstairs apartment. It is fully self-contained, but I want to be picky about the tenant as we are close to a university and I don't want any loud parties or music late at night, so I'm offering it for very cheap. $150 a week. Market for similar in this area is $250 to $350, with some conditions like no loud music after 8 p.m., no gatherings of more than 7 people, etc., etc. Nothing that I think is particularly unreasonable. My ex, who I dated when I was 22 to 26, was one of the first applicants and came to the first viewing that I conducted. I told him before the viewing that I thought he would be wasting his time to come as I didn't think he would be a good fit. He throws regular large parties, plays loud music, etc. In the 4 years I knew him, he was kicked out of multiple flats for not being considerate of others. He is also extremely controlling. During the flat viewing, he tried to tell other people that he was definitely taking the place, and was constantly telling me where he wanted furniture moved to, and which pieces I'd have to put in storage so he can move his stuff in. After the second viewing, where he showed up unannounced, I told him that I had someone very interested and he couldn't move in. This was a white lie, as I had a few interested but no one committed yet. 2 weeks later, I re-advertised and he immediately started hassling me again. And I told him that I would absolutely never rent to him, so to leave me alone. He flipped his crap, hassling me about my daughter needing a father, that I was biased against him, etc. I ended up blocking him because he was calling all hours of the night to hassle me. Now, friends of both of us are at me to give him a second chance, and I'm starting to feel guilty. It's been 6 years since we split. Maybe he's changed and I dismissed him without consideration. Am I the a-hole here? He is not the father of my daughter. She was conceived using a sperm donor and a surrogate. I have a family history of cervical cancer, and when I was 25 or 26, I had a couple of smears that showed abnormal precancerous cells. Ex didn't want kids ever, and didn't want to go through cancer treatments, so we split up. I spent a couple years dating, but was diagnosed with cervical cancer when I was 27. I had eggs collected, and then had a full hysterectomy. After I was through with treatment and in the all clear, I arranged a surrogate and my daughter was born. Now for the top comments. Why would you give a chance to this guy? He's clearly still a massive jerk, harassing you over this. He obviously hasn't changed. Not a-hole. What Opie needs to give him is a restraining order. Not a-hole. I mean, his current behavior alone shows exactly why he should never, ever be your tenant. Ever. And his previous behavior's even worse. Who wants loads of parties held in their home when there's a small child around? Yeah, he's trying to be controlling now, and he doesn't even live there. Not a-hole. And remember, no is a complete sentence. Don't even give an excuse or reason. You owe him nothing. Every response from now on needs to be a simple no, not one word more. Not a-hole. Never rent to this guy. Tell your friends to stuff it. Terrible red flags all over the place. If you rent to him, you'll never get him out of your business. He clearly feels entitled to you and your environment. He is behaving like a stalker. The last story is titled, Am I the a-hole for not changing my rules and terminating care? I have a home daycare. I like to think I'm pretty lenient, but I do have one big rule. Don't make me the bad guy. I understand we might have different rules, but don't make your child resent me by not backing me up. Anyway, another rule is I don't allow outside toys or electronics. Kids can bring a stuffed animal for a nap if they're sleeping in rest mats, but I don't want to be responsible if something gets broken. Years ago, I used to let kids bring whatever. Then a cheap McDonald's toy broke by accident. Kid was upset and mom got mad at me. So now, it's a hard rule. Most are okay with it, but I have a new kid, 3, whose mom wanted him to bring his tablet because he needs it. I said sorry, but no. I'm not going to be responsible for it. We went back and forth, but finally she just says fine. But every morning, he's crying because she took his tablet from him in the car. She always gives me this look and says, "Miss Lucy says no tablet." I always try to say we have plenty of toys, but the kid spends the whole morning sulking. I've talked to mom, asked her to leave it at home and not even put it in the car, but she says he needs it. It's been a month, and yesterday was the last straw that broke the camel's back. Kid came in crying, as usual. I tried my usual redirection, which didn't work. Mom was giving me a look of, "See what you did?" Then she had the nerve to say to him, "I know you need your tablet. We've talked about this before. Miss Lucy is strict." That pissed me off. I ended up telling her to take him home right then and there. She was shocked and tried to stammer. He was my first kid of the day, so there was no scene. I just handed back his backpack, said he was no longer a student of mine, and began to pack his extra clothes and a sippy cup he kept. Mom was in tears as she left. My husband thinks she was right. I'm too strict and should have broken policy instead of causing drama. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. Tell your husband to watch the kid. That kid has problems if he's already addicted to that tablet. $10 says he needs it. Means I don't want to have to engage him, so I shut him up with electronics. Or tell your husband you are paying for another tablet that got ruined at your house. I have never heard of a daycare or preschool that allows expensive personal electronics, unless a child is disabled. Not the a-hole. If her only explanation was that he needs it without any context or information, then she knew your rules before enrolling her kid. She can't expect people to bend to her every whim. I agree. If she indicated it was used as a communication tool for a child with language delays / inability to communicate otherwise, that would be a totally different story. Not the a-hole. She had an entire month to explain to this kid that there can be no electronics at daycare. She chose to act like it was a big deal every single morning, so of course kid is going to act that way. Obviously, she wasn't even trying to follow the rules. You did right. In situations like this, you give an inch and they will take a mile. Or someone else will demand an exception. It becomes too hard to keep up with it all. Anyone with a sob story will get you to waver. You are doing the right thing to just stop it now. Your husband is kind of being a jerk about it. Why should you bend the rules for this one kid? What does he care? I'm sure you can find someone to take his place. What kind of example does it set for all of the other kids? Also, a 3-year-old should not need any electronic whatsoever. Kid is a toddler. Should not be that attached to a screen. She probably never actually parents that kid. I'm sure the tablet does all the work for her. And that's the end of this video, folks. As always, leave a comment and hit like and subscribe. And if you want more of this content, turn your notification on to get updated on the latest videos. And I'll catch you in the next one. Stay safe.